So it begins with a mystery. The mystery is, why is it that mental health statistics for American teenagers were pretty flat? There was no sign of any problem from the late 90s all the way through 2010, 2011. Whether we look at depression, anxiety, self-harm, suicide, those are the main ones that I'm tracking. And then all of a sudden in 2012, it's as though someone flipped a switch and the girls begin getting much more anxious, depressed, and self-harming. Boys do too, but it's not very sudden, 2012, 2013. It's more gradual. And I had already seen this. We first really discovered this on college campuses because the students who arrived on university campuses in 2014, 2015 were very different from our stereotype of college students who want to have fun, they want to drink, they want to party. The students arriving in 2014, 15 were much more anxious, and especially they were triggered by words or jokes or speakers or books. So it was that observation that led Greg Lukianoff to formulate the hypothesis that college is doing something to kids to make them think this in this distorted way. And that was the basis of our book, The Coddling the American Mind. But now it was becoming clear, and we saw that in the book, that it wasn't just college, it was actually all teenagers. It was all people born after 1995. I knew that was happening in Britain also, and Canada. But as I began to learn that actually this is happening in a lot of other countries as well. So that's the mystery. What happened? Why was it so sudden? Is it a chemical that was dropped in the water supply all over North America, Northern Europe, the South Pacific? Or was it the massive change in the technological environment of childhood in all these countries simultaneously? So that was kind of the obvious hypothesis, and that's what chapter 1 goes into, is what actually happened to teen mental health. And then the rest of the book is an effort to answer, and it's not just, social media is destroying everybody. It's actually, I hope it's a more subtle and interesting story, which is about the transformation of childhood. There's really two phases in the book. But since the book is done, there's actually a third phase. Let me start with that. The book is about a tragedy that occurred in 3 acts. So Act 1, which I only hint at in the book, was the loss of community. So if you look at America, especially after World War II, countries have very, very high social capital. That's the best way to make people trust each other, is have someone attack them from the outside, and they come together and they fight a war and they win. And then that begins to drop for many reasons. And Robert Putnam talked about this in Bowling Alone, and you have smaller family sizes. People retreat inside because now they have air conditioning and TV. They're not on the front. So for a lot of reasons, we begin to lose trust in each other. We begin to lose social capital. That's Act 1 of the tragedy. Because of that, Act 2 happens, which is we take away the play-based childhood. Children used to always play. It didn't matter if it was raining or snowing. Kids went out to play. It didn't matter if there was a crime wave or drunk drivers. When I was growing up, we had both. Kids went out to play. All over New York City, kids went out to play. Because kids need to play. We're mammals, kids have to play. But in the 90s, we decided, too dangerous, you'll get kidnapped, we can't have that. We really kind of locked our kids up out of fear of each other. Frank Furedi, a British sociologist, describes what happened in the UK at the same time. He says the main culprit was the loss of adult solidarity, and that was from Act 1. So Act 2, we take away free play. And Greg and I wrote about this in The Coddling the American Mind. Coddling means overprotection. And in the coddling, we speculated, we had like a page on how, now maybe, social media, it comes in at the right time, that maybe this is part of it. We don't know. This is 2017, we really didn't know. What The Anxious Generation is about is that now we know that the crucial third act, the third act of the tragedy, was the massive, sudden transformation of childhood between 2010 and 2015. So in 2010, almost all kids all over the developed world, they have cell phones, but they're flip phones or basic phones or Nokias. All you can do with them is text and call. That's pretty much it. There was like a game, Snake. There was some other game that they would play, but that it's for communicating. And that's good. Kids can text their friends, let's meet at 3:00, and it's a tool they use to meet up. There's very little high-speed internet. There's no front-facing camera. There is Facebook, but there's no Instagram. And so that's the way things were in 2010, and kids still had what I think is a recognizably human childhood. They would meet up. They didn't have much freedom, but they would still meet up in person. By 2015, that's all changed. By 2015, about 80% have a smartphone, All smartphones now have a front-facing camera, so now you have selfie culture. Almost everyone now has high-speed internet, so now everything can be video. So by 2015, we have what I've called the great rewiring of childhood. And that's why in 2012, which is the year that Facebook buys Instagram, I can't prove that was the reason, but 2012 is, I think, when the online life especially changes for girls. They all flock onto Instagram. And that's when they get anxious, depressed, and self-harming.
The main critics I've heard about you is this is a correlation, not a cause.
Yeah.
And that you're a technical determinist.
Yeah. So first of all, my story is not just technology. It is sociological. It's a cultural psychology story. And it's about the change of childhood, and a lot of it is about development. I'm involved in a sort of a normal and academic debate with about 7 researchers who claim that, it's just a correlation. It's just, yes, but a lot of things changed in the early 2010s. It could have been anything. So I say a couple of things. The first is, whatever other factor you think it was, did that happen in New Zealand and Iceland and Australia at the same time? And no one can find such a factor. Nobody else can even propose an alternate theory. It's not the global financial crisis. That was years earlier, and why did that affect teen girls mostly? So that's the first thing. There's no other culprit here that can work internationally. The second thing is the claim is often the data is mostly correlational. Yeah, that's true. If you have 500, you have about, say, 200 or 300 correlational studies and 25 experimental studies, I would say the data is mostly correlational, but we do have experimental studies. I cite them in the book. I go into great detail in the book about the difference between correlation and causation. And more are coming out every week, every month. We have more experiments indicating causality. The third is that the scientific debate has been focused on a very, very narrow question, which is, does the hours on social media tell you anything about the level of mental illness, especially depression, anxiety? And there's a correlation there, and then there's the question of the cause. But there are 15 other causal connections that are clearly causal. So for example, sextortion is a very common crime online. There's international gangs of sextortionists. They have an avatar that's a beautiful, sexy young woman. She flirts with a boy that she finds on Instagram, or usually Instagram. And then when she convinces him to swap nudes, boom, he reveals himself as, I'm not a sexy girl. I now have everything I need to ruin you. I'm going to show this picture of you and your penis to everyone you know because I have all your contacts, unless you pay me $500 in 2 hours. And the boys panic. And a lot of them have killed themselves because of the shame. The FBI has identified 20 specifically that were because of sextortion, which means that probably it's hundreds, because how many did the FBI catch? It's a shameful act. So hundreds probably have committed suicide, which means thousands, tens of thousands have been traumatized by this. Now, is that just a correlation? These suicides, the kid would have killed himself anyway. It's just a coincidence that he was sextorted yesterday and he killed himself today. So in the experience of families all over the developed world, this is not just some reverse correlation. This is causation.
In the book, you have very specific recommendations, proposals for parents to protect their kids.
Sure. So the key to the whole book is understanding collective action problems. And this is a really important common idea in the social sciences, that often there's a situation, it's sometimes called the tragedy of the commons, where each person acting in their own interest ends up bringing about an outcome that's bad for everyone. And if you're the only one who doesn't put your sheep out to graze, if you're the only one who doesn't overfish the pond, you suffer, and nothing gets changed, and everyone else continues to do what they're doing. One of the main reasons that we all are giving our kids phones now at age 9 or 10 is now very common. It gets younger all the time, is because the kid comes home and says, "Mom, everyone else has an iPhone. I have to have an iPhone. I'm being left out." So this is a collective action problem, because anyone who does the right thing and says, "No, you're not going to get one until you're mostly done with puberty," they're imposing a cost on their child. All over the developed world now, family life has devolved into a struggle over screen time and phones. And this is terrible. And so the trick is to realize we're in this problem because everybody else is in this problem. And the kids have to be on, even though they recognize it's bad for them, because everyone else is on. So that's what got us so deep into this. But it's also what gets us out. It's very hard to get out by yourself, although many people are strong, many parents do. They just lay down the law. They say, no, you're not getting what. I don't care if you're cut off. My hope is that we won't have to do that anymore. My hope and my plan and what I'm trying to do with the book is to say, just if we team up with a few other families, contact the families of your kids' friends, talk to the parents, they probably share your concerns. If a small group of parents, or if a whole school or school district does this, then they escape. And we can change this very, very quickly. 4 norms. What we need are 4 norms, and we can roll back. We can break the back of the collective action problem. We can escape. The norms are very simple. No smartphone before high school. Just keep it out of middle school. Let the kids get at least through early puberty, which is the most sensitive period. So no smartphone before high school. You can give them a flip phone if you absolutely need to text. I understand the need to coordinate. Second norm, no social media before 16. Social media is entirely inappropriate for children. It cannot be made appropriate, because what you're basically doing is you're saying, how about we let the entire world get in touch with you? We let all the companies try to do things to you. We let all the men all over the world who want to have sex with you contact you and try to trick you into sending photos. We let you watch beheading videos, all horrible, horrible stuff. No, there's no way to make this safe. So just recognize social media is a tool for adults. 11-year-olds don't need to network with strangers. So no social media till 16. The third rule is phone-free schools. And imagine, when I was a kid growing up in the 70s, if we were allowed to bring in our television set and our radio and a paint by numbers kit and all sorts of toys and games, put them on our desk, use them during class. That's what teachers are facing today. Teachers are quitting. Teachers are disgusted. Teachers can't get through to the students. Global test scores are dropping since 2012. It's not since COVID, it's since 2012. So we have a massive destruction of human capital. So it's just kind of obvious. You can't have kids have the greatest distraction device ever invented in their pockets while they're in class, because they do use them. They have to use them. If others are texting, they have to be texting. So phone-free schools, just lock up the phone in the morning, they get it back at the end of the day. And the fourth norm is far more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world. Because if you're gonna roll back the phone-based childhood and you don't restore the play-based childhood, then your kids have no childhood. So we roll this back and instead give them adventure, fun, other kids. So we have to overcome our own fears and let our children out to play with each other. Kids playing in groups are very safe. That's how they learn to get along. That's how they learn to resolve disputes. So if we do these 4 things, we roll back the phone-based childhood and we restore the play-based childhood. And I'm pretty confident that rates of mental illness will come down within 2 years, because a lot of these things work very quickly. Phone-free schools, you get great results within a month. Various other childhood independence projects, you get results within a month. So I think if any group, any community does all 4 of these, they're going to see pretty big drops in depression, anxiety, self-harm, other problems within 2 years.
Implicit in your remarks is you don't have any faith in the Snapchats or the TikToks of the world to be able to regulate smartphones.
Yeah. Well,
for children.
I do have faith based on experience that they will not do anything. Right now, as long as you're old enough to lie about your age, you can be 7 and you can go to Pornhub, you can open 20 Instagram accounts, you can open TikTok accounts. So the law says 13, you have to be 13 to sign a contract with a company to give away your data without your parents' knowledge. But the law is written such that there's no responsibility. The law is literally written so that the companies don't want to know your real age. As long as they don't know your real age, they can't be held liable for serving you eating disorder content and sex and violence and all sorts of things. We're talking about 5 to 10 companies here that own our children's childhood. These companies created a world, they invite our children in, they own our children's childhood. They have a lot more influence over our kids than we do in some ways. And they have no responsibility. They are literally protected from lawsuits by Section 230. We cannot sue them for what they show to our kids. So this is a completely insane situation, and they're making huge amounts of money. So yeah, I don't expect them to do anything until they are forced by legislation or the biggest class action lawsuits in human history. They're not literally class action lawsuits, there's a legal complexity, but there are thousands and thousands of parents suing them because they think their kid's death was not just a correlation, it was causation.
Now, you've been going around on a book tour. Your book's on the New York Times bestseller list. It's obviously hit a chord with parents, with school authorities.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense of the TikTok crowd, the kids themselves?
And so over and over again, we find when you survey college students or over 18, when you survey kids who've been through this, it's really, really hard to find members of Gen Z who are opposed to what I'm saying. In fact, I actually haven't found any. They almost always say, yeah, you're right, this really messed us up, but what are you going to do? This is just the way things are, and I can't quit because everyone else is on. And there's an extraordinary sense of fatalism, but what we don't find is any young people organizing to protect their rights to have these things. The older kids generally say, if we could get everyone off, we should do that.
Now, this is not a solution for the liberal West, but China imposes a time limit on smartphone usage. Is that a good idea in the scheme of things?
Yeah. China is engaged in a battle with the United States for cultural and economic supremacy. Since our young people are giving away all of their available attention, there's a good chance that they will be less creative and less productive. They don't have any spare attention to actually do anything. China, I imagine that makes China very happy. And since the worst single product for American children is TikTok, it sucks up more of their time and energy, not even energy, it doesn't take energy. It sucks up more of their attention than any other product. And it harms them. It doesn't do anything good for them. TikTok has more influence over our kids than any other organization on the planet. So there are many, many reasons to think that that this is a danger to our kids. It's a danger to our country. It's making our kids stupider, literally stupider, because they're not learning in school. They're on TikTok, a lot of them, or they're texting. Authoritarian solutions are not right for us, but democratic solutions are. And what Tocqueville praised about Americans, he said the difference for America is that in France, when something needs doing, the townspeople need to build a bridge, they wait for the king to do it. And in Britain, if they need a bridge, they wait for the nobles to do it. And in America, if they need a bridge, they come together and they form a group and they elect a leader and they raise money and then they do it. So what I'm hopeful is that my book is presenting 4 norms that we can do ourselves, even if we never get any help from Congress. We can do these ourselves. So I'm hoping this is a very American solution to what I think is one of the largest problems facing America today.
You now have all these kids in college putting up barricades, occupying administration buildings on the Palestinian issue. How does that fit with the coddling generation?
Well, most of activism has moved online. That tends to be very ineffective, and it's created a culture that is very, very bad for the activists. So I quote some research in the book showing that before 2010, being politically active was actually associated with better mental health. You were engaged, you were part of a group, you were energized. Whereas after 2010, activists, especially progressive activists, are the least happy people in the country. They are marinating in beliefs about oppressor-victim. They've embraced the 3 great untruths of the coddling. So that was certainly true until very recently. Now it's true, these protests are in person. So that's at least better in the sense of psychologically for them. So they are physically present on campus. I think there are a couple of signs that it's different from previous generations. One is that they are asking for accommodations. They often ask for not to be punished for missing classes. Let's delay exams. Whereas civil disobedience used to mean you break the law and then you pay the consequences to show how committed you are to the cause. So this is relatively low cost for them. It is communal, which is always very exciting. So yeah, I mean, it's not as though Gen Z is incapable of acting in person. I would point out it's overwhelmingly at the elite schools that this is happening. So there's all kinds of interesting things going on with class and gender and politics. But I don't think this is, it's not as though it's uncharacteristic of Gen Z to do political protest.
One of the reasons that we have such a paralyzed and polarized society is that the public sphere has disappeared. It was, say, in the old days or until recently, the public sphere was a place where competing ideas could be contested in the full view of the body politic. I just wanted to quote, I sent you a note on this in the past year sometime, this philosopher Byung-Chul Han.
Oh, I love him, yes.
That peer-to-peer connectivity of social media redirects the flow of communication. Information is spread without forming a public sphere. It is produced in private spaces and distributed to private spaces. Mm-hmm. The web does not create a public.
That's right.
Renee DiResta at Stanford, I don't know if you've seen her.
Oh, I love her, yeah.
Argues that niche propagandists who basically stoke their tribes, which are speaking to each other, not in the public sphere, are becoming the main media influence. Mm-hmm. She calls them the new media giants, even more than mainstream media. Yeah. So it seems what's happening, and I guess I'm thinking of your trajectory of where you go next with what you've done, is that the digital media ecosystem is actually disempowering the public sphere. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Do you agree with that analysis?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So, I was supposed to be working on a book about capitalism and morality. Back in 2014, I got a contract to write a book called 3 Stories About Capitalism, The Moral Psychology of Economic Life. But I had all these ideas about what the hell is going wrong with our country? Why is everything so crazy? And I had all these ideas for essays I wanted to write. And I pitched them to The Atlantic, and they said, don't write us 8 essays, write one big one. So I wrote one big one, which they titled, Why the Past 10 Years of American Life Have Been Uniquely Stupid. And in that article, I made the case, basically along the lines very similar to Byung-Chul Han, that massive changes in information flow and the way we connect people, they change the fundamental ground within which our democratic institutions are operating. And it's quite possible that we are now so far outside the operating range of these institutions that they will fail. I'm extremely alarmed about the future of this country. If you read Federalist 10, the founding fathers were excellent social psychologists. They were very afraid of the passions of the people. They didn't want us to have a direct democracy. They wanted cooling mechanisms. They wanted a republic with democratic. So anyway, they constructed a whole like a really complicated clock that they thought could last, if not forever, could last a very long time because it was realistic about human frailties. And they were right. And then all of a sudden, in the last, you might say it begins with television, but that's complicated. It really begins with the internet and then especially social media.
Peer-to-peer.
Yes, that's right, exactly. Because with television, it was at least there were editors. Jonathan Rauch, I think, has written one of the most important books on this. He has an amazing book called The Constitution of Knowledge, which is a play on words. It's both how is knowledge constituted, how do we make knowledge, like in universities and science and medicine. But it's also like the US Constitution, like the community of knowledge makers are governed by certain rules and checks and balances, and we developed editors and mechanisms to vet truth. All that's gone now, or at least the institutions are weakened. The knowledge-generating institutions have humiliated themselves, lost the trust not just of the right, but of the center as well. So I'm very alarmed that our knowledge-creating institutions are malfunctioning. And at the same time, what's replacing it is these sorts of peer-to-peer networks that you're talking about. Now, in the history of humanity, when you connect people, there could be disruptions, but in the long run, it's good. It increases knowledge flow, it increases creativity. You get more value when you connect people. So the telephone was great. The postal system was great. Social media is not like that. Social media is not like those earlier innovations. I think the best metaphor here is imagine a public square in which people talk, they debate, ideas are put forth. The ideas may not always be brilliant, they may not always be civil, but people can speak and people to some extent listen, and sometimes people move. That's what I think the founding fathers were assuming. That's about the best we can hope for. Imagine one day, and I'll call it 2009, that all changes. And there's no more green, public square, no more soapboxes. Everything takes place in the center of the Roman Colosseum. And the stands are full of people they're there to see blood. That's what they came for. They don't want to see the lion and the Christian making nice. They want to see one of them kill the other. And that's what Twitter, often is like. And so it becomes performative. It becomes super fast paced. It changes with television. When television came in, it made us all passive consumers, is what Marshall McLuhan says and Neil Postman. It changed the way we are, and that changed our politics. And that helped Ronald Reagan, who was an entertainer and an actor. He became the paragon or successful politician in the television age. But then we go from television to social media, and the central act in social media is posting, judging, criticizing, joining mobs. Now Donald Trump is the quintessential person who thrives in that environment. If not for Twitter, Trump never could have been president. So when our politics moves into the Roman Colosseum, I think the founding fathers would have said, let's just give up. There's no way we can build a democracy in this environment.
So my final question is following up on the founding fathers. So the founding fathers in all republics have put in place checks and balances when too much power is concentrated in one place. In the social media age, we need just the opposite. When social media so disempowers the public sphere, you need checks and balances about the disempowerment of the public sphere. When information is so distributed, when power is so distributed, you need checks and balances on that, as well as too much concentration of power. What I have in mind, we can finish the conversation, but what I have in mind is like deliberative citizens assemblies, where you kind of recreate at least a mini public sphere that echoes or represents, or the broader public sphere, where you have negotiation, compromise, facts, that kind of thing.
Well,
that's the check and balance. That's the kind of thing.
I see. No, it's possible to create these small artificial communities. These experiments where you lock citizens away together for a week and have them discuss something. And from what I've read, they work pretty well and they come up with solutions. But it's not clear to me how you could use that to run a country. That is, the way people feel about, let's say, Donald Trump has very little to do with some ascertainment of fact. If you use the word power, then I'm a little bit confused, but I think I see what you're getting at. And if we change the word to authority, then I'd be more comfortable answering. When I wrote The Righteous Mind, and I was on the left then, and I really tried to understand conservatives. And for me, reading conservative writings, especially Edmund Burke, was really clarifying. And the conservative idea that we need institutions, even if we don't understand them. We need religion, we need gods, we need moral order, we need constraint, even if it's not true. The progressive impulse is tear things down, make things new. The conservative impulse is no, protect the authority structures because we need them, and without them we have chaos. And I think there are times to tear things down, but I think the 2010s, everything's been torn down. This is a time we need to build. So I am very concerned that there is no longer any source of authority. There is no trusted authority. There is no way to find the truth. We had an election which was contested, and it seems that the truth-seeking mechanisms came up with the answer that the election was not stolen, but there's no real way to spread that around. And I think with AI coming in, the problem of the loss of authority is going to be magnified tenfold, 100-fold. When anyone can create a video of anyone saying anything in that person's voice, it's going to be almost impossible to know what's true. So I think we're in for a wild ride if we're going to try to run a democratic republic with no real authority. My fear is that we will simply become ungovernable. That, I think, is a risk that we face.